Welcome back, everybody. Last week, we moved my lab from MAB to PEEP. And what is PEEP? It's really just username and password authentication. So, if I have a username and password, a valid username and password, I can log in with any device that I want. I can take that username and password, log into a tablet, a laptop, a cell phone, whatever it is, and authenticate to the network. I might want to have better control over that. And this is why ETLS, it's a great thing to look at because the device needs a certificate to connect to the network. Now with PEEP, we're not forcing that certificate check. So we're just looking for a valid username and password. We might want to take a look at what devices, what type of devices are connecting to the network. Today, we're going to talk about profiling with Cisco ISE. And what's profiling? I'll give you an example. Let's say my son, he has a bucket of Lego pieces. Red, black, yellow, circles, squares, whatever it is. A big bucket of just spare pieces. They're not organized. He dumps them on the floor. We begin to organize, to classify things. We want to separate the red Lego pieces into one bucket, black Lego pieces into another, circle Lego pieces, round Lego pieces into yet another bucket. We're classifying these types of Lego pieces so that we can perform certain activities or certain builds with these different pieces that we need. It makes for a cleaner build just to have these devices or these Lego pieces separated out. So that's what we're going to do today is we're going to create some profiling policies that we can apply to the lab. Let's say to stop my cell phone from connecting because I don't want iPhones to connect to my lab. Let's take a look at profiling. You can spend a lot of time customizing policy for profiling. Why? Because there's a ton of devices out there. MacBooks, Windows devices, different operating systems, mobile devices, IoT devices. The list goes on and on. But I'll sum it up for you. There's really three areas that profiling comes down to. The collection of data. How do you know what this device is? What probe are you using? Are you taking a look at just radius attributes? Are you taking a look at DHCP? Is it NetFlow? There are many ways to collect that data. Once you have that data, it is time to classify. So like I spoke earlier about the Lego pieces, moving the reds into one bucket, moving the yellow Lego pieces into another bucket, that's the time to separate those iPhones, the Samsungs, these different devices. Now, then you take that data and you apply it to a policy. I want to block this certain operating system from connecting, or I want to allow only these devices connect to my network. There are so many things you can do, and it really comes down to those three areas. Now, how are we collecting data? In my lab, really, it's just DHCP probing, and I'm sending data from the wireless controller over to ICE. If we take a look at my deployment, I'll go to administration, we'll go to deployment. The first thing we want to do is let's make sure profiling is enabled. You're not going to do much if it's not. So we'll take a look at my node here, and you'll see that the profiling service is enabled. We'll go up to profiling configuration, and this is the probing. How are we collecting this information? DHCP, I'm not doing any NetFlow, I'm not doing any spanning, but you can do those things. I'm collecting radius information. I'm also doing an Nmap scan out there. You can see we have SNMP, DNS. There are many options for collecting that data, and it's just trying to figure out what is this device? Is it a Windows device? Is it a MacBook, iOS? Well, what is it that is connecting and authenticating into my network? You want to know. It's important to know what devices connect to your network. Now, weeks ago, I mentioned the work centers. Work centers make life easier for you when you're trying to configure something new in your environment. And as you can see here, we have a work center for profiler, for profiling, and doing these activities makes life easier using this work center. So if we take a look at our work center that we have here, let's click on the overview. The overview will set you up with the direction that you need to go in to set up profiling. Now, I'm going to skip around a little bit. We already took a look at the deployment and made sure that we have probes on. I am collecting that information from my network. It's coming over to ICE. But I want to take a look at the definitions here, defining the elements and the policies. That's important. Let's click on logical profiles. As you can see here, if you wanted to, you can create these logical groups. So if you want to put certain groups of devices together and use that in a policy, you can do that. So as you can see here, some of the defaults, medical devices, mobile devices, that's out there. And then we also have the profiling policies that are out there. Out of the box, what am I taking a look at? Let's take a look at Apple. We'll fetch those records. We can see there's a lot of different types of Apple devices out there. So if we take a look at, let's look at our iPhone here. We'll click on that. We'll see that there are certain rules, certain elements that are applied to find out if this device really is an iPhone. There's a certainty factor. And if you're hitting some of these rules here, that increases your certainty factor to say, this really is an iPhone. It's not a perfect system. We're trying to figure out what this device is. And if we don't have some sort of MDM installed, if we don't have certificates to control that, there can be some scenarios where that's not really an iPhone, or that's not really this particular device. So it's important to take a look at the rules, and you can customize these rules. You can increase the certainty factor on different rules that are out there. And we'll take a look at what these rules are. But as you can see there are 3 different rules that are applying to this iPhone. If you're hitting these rules, the certainty factor increases, and then at that point, most likely this is an iPhone. We're going to tag it, we're going to profile it as an iPhone, and then you can use that in a policy. Now let's take a look at these rules here. So these are elements. If we go back to Work Center, we'll click on Policy Elements, and you can see those rules there. So we'll type iPhone here. And those are the three rules. Now, if there's a user agent that contains iPhone, a host name contains iPhone, those are ways that you can say, hey, this is an iPhone. It says iPhone. Again, not perfect, but we combine these rules out there and we increase the certainty factor as needed. Usually the defaults will suffice, but these rules help us determine what these devices are. And we'll take a look at one of these rules. We'll click in here. We can see that contains iPhone. That's the attribute. And you can add more rules depending on your environment. Every environment is different. So you might have to customize some of these rules according to your environment, but it's not bad. It's an easy process. It's a process that you do need to test out. I never test anything out of production. That's not the place for testing. I've said that before in different videos. Not production. It's best if you always try these things out in a lab like I'm doing here in the basement. Now, let's say you have your rules. You have what you determine these devices are. These rules will say this is an iPhone. And let's say you do classify those devices as iPhones, MacBooks, whatever they are. I want to take that information and use it in a policy, whether it is to allow, whether it is to block. So let's go back to Work Centers, and you can see there that there's also a policy sets area that'll bring me to my policy that you might be familiar with now. It's very simple. We're going to take a look at this lab access PEEP wireless 8021X, and we will open that up. Now we're making this change in the authorization section. So we'll go down to authorization, and you'll see there the very simple authorization section that I have. If you're in this Active Directory group, you're allowed to authenticate any device, whether it's an iPhone or some sort of other tablet, anything that's out there, username and password's correct, it's going to let you in. I want to control that. So let's say, as an example, we want to stop iPhones from connecting. Let's take a look at that. We will create another policy here, or another rule, and we'll call this block iPhones. And here are my conditions. So now I'm looking for those groups that are out there. We'll add an attribute here. And this is an identity group. I'll use the name. And my identity group, I want to find, let's look for Apple iPhone. I want to be specific. Again, you can be as specific as you need to as you create these groups, as you create those rules. And that's it. Let's keep it that simple. Now I want to block iPhones. And what am I going to do here? We're going to deny access. So I have my group. I'm looking for iPhones. So anything that comes in and gets profiled as an iPhone, it's going to be blocked. And my phone, when it connects, it is profiled as an iPhone. Now let's save this here. There we go. Now I want to try and connect my iPhone and let's see what happens. All right, unable to join after I trusted the self-signed cert. Let's give it a second and let's see if something pops up under operations and live logs. There we go. So we have an auth failed. And as you can see there, my endpoint profile, Apple iPhone. Let's click on Y. Here we go. So my Apple iPhone hit that block iPhones rule. So again, you can use this in a number of combinations. If you want to allow, if you want to add a combination of Active Directory group and blocking, Active Directory group and allowing, there are so many things you can do with profiling. The important part here is to do something to classify those devices, to find out what is authenticating in your journey towards ETLS. I mean, that's where we want to go in my lab. But for now, profiling is something great to take a look at. Check it out on your end and let me know how it goes.